Today, we'll be talking about the history of space exploration. A complex combination of incentives has fueled the development of space exploration, including scientific curiosity, competition between government ideologies, economics, and more. How did it all begin? What was the first space mission? Without further ado, let's find out. Humans fantasized about space as they gazed up into the starry sky. Humans are driven to explore the unknown, find new planets, and push the boundaries of science and technology. Human space exploration helps address fundamental questions about the history of our universe and our place in the cosmos. Although the prospect of exploring space has long piqued the interest of people from all walks of life, only national governments could afford the exorbitant expenditures of sending people and machinery into space for the majority of the 20th century and into the early 21st century. Because of this, space exploration has had to serve a wide range of interests. Government space initiatives have improved knowledge, functioned as markers of national status and power, bolstered national security, military, and benefited the general people significantly. Governments took the lead in supporting research that expanded fundamental understanding about nature in the years following World War II. Universities, private foundations, and other non-governmental backers have previously filled this position. This shift occurred for two reasons. To begin with, the requirement for specialized technology to conduct numerous scientific experiments and the vast teams of researchers required to employ that equipment resulted in expenditures that only governments could pay. Second, governments were ready to shoulder this burden because they believed that basic research would yield new information critical to their population's health, security, and quality of life. As a result, when scientists requested government funding for early space projects, they received it. For millennia, scientists have contemplated the possibility of going to the furthest reaches of the universe. Several experimental rockets launched into space were attempted in the 1940s, but none of them successfully reached the necessary heights. In the latter part of the 20th century, rockets were strong enough to overcome gravity and achieve orbital velocity, clearing the door for space travel to become a reality. In the 1930s and 1940s, Nazi Germany recognized the potential of long-range rockets as a weapon. London was struck late in World War II by 200-mile range V-2 rockets that arced 60 miles high over the English Channel at more than 3,500 miles per hour. Following World War II, the US and the Soviet Union developed their own missile programs. Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite, was launched into space by the Soviets in 1957. Yuri Gagarin became the first man to circle the Earth 4 years later, and his flight lasted 108 minutes, and he reached a height of 327 kilometers. The Americans were envious of the Russians' achievements, and the fact that the two countries were involved in a Cold War did not help matters. The space race was born as a result of this. In 1958, a new government organization named the National Aeronautics and Space Administration was formed to oversee space exploration operations in the United States, which we know as NASA. As each country attempted to outpace the other in the growth of outer space technology and achievements, the space race ushered in a massive shift in space research. Following the launch of two satellites by the Soviet Union, Explorer 1, the first American satellite, was launched into orbit in 1958. Alan Shepard was the first American to travel into space in 1961. President John F. Kennedy established a nation objective in 1961 of landing a man on the moon and safely returning him to Earth within a decade. Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, made one giant leap for humanity. Between 1969 and 1972, 6 Apollo missions were launched to study the moon. Before humans landed on the moon in the 1960s, uncrewed spacecraft photographed and explored the surface. The Mariner spacecraft was circling and surveying the surface of Mars by the early 1970s, and orbiting communications and navigation satellites were commonplace. By the end of the decade, the Voyager spacecraft had provided comprehensive photographs of Jupiter and Saturn, their rings, and moons. Skylab, America's first space station, and the Apollo-Soyuz test project, the world's first multinational crewed American and Russian space mission, were both highlights of the 1970s in human spaceflight. People could pick up satellite signals on their home dish antennas in the 1980s as satellite communications grew to carry television shows. Satellites revealed an ozone hole over Antarctica, localized forest fires, and captured images of the tragedy of the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Astronomical satellites discovered new stars and provided a unique perspective on the core of our galaxy. The launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia in April 1981 signaled a beginning of a period in which most civilian and military space missions relied on the reusable shuttle. 24 successful shuttle launches met various scientific and military objectives before the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded barely 73 seconds after liftoff on January 1986. The importance of satellites in modern battles was demonstrated during the Gulf War. Allied troops were able to gain a significant edge in this fight, controlling the high ground of space. Satellites were utilized to gain information on opposing force formations and movements and offer early warning of hostile missile strikes and accurate navigation in the featureless desert environment. Satellite advantages helped coalition troops to rapidly bring the battle to a close, sparing countless lives. Homeland defense, weather monitoring, connectivity, mapping, imaging, and remote sensing for chemicals, fires, and other calamities are becoming more dependent on space systems. Are you enjoying the video? If you are, make sure to like this video, subscribe to SpaceX Facts, and push the notification button for more. Now, let's move on to the beginning of the International Space Station. The International Space Station is a low Earth orbiting research laboratory. This high-flying laboratory has become a symbol of collaboration in space research, with competitors now working together thanks to many diverse partners contributing to its design and construction. Since the arrival of Expedition 1 in November of 2000, the station has been continually inhabited. Various visiting spacecraft service the station, including the Russian Soyuz and Progress, the American Dragon and Cygnus, the Japanese H-2 transfer vehicle, and previously the Space Shuttle and the European Automated Transfer Vehicle. Cosmonauts, astronauts, and space travelers from 17 different countries have visited. Space launch systems were created to lower costs while increasing reliance, security, and efficiency. The majority of military and research satellites in the United States are put into orbit using a family of reusable launch vehicles that may be used for a range of purposes. Other countries have their own launch systems, and the commercial launch business is very competitive in developing the next generation of launch systems. Unfortunately, not all space missions have been successful. There have been several mishaps with space missions, some of which have resulted in fatalities. After the Challenger incident, the Columbia incident was the second space shuttle disaster. The shuttle broke apart upon re-entering the Earth's atmosphere in 2003, killing all 7 crew members. The accident happened above Texas just minutes before arriving at the Kennedy Space Center. The Apollo 1 caught fire during a simulation launch in 1967, killing all crew members. When the Soyuz 1 ran into technical difficulties shortly after takeoff, Russia's plan to land on the moon ended in disaster as well. Because he could not solve the problem, the single crew member died. Modern space exploration is taking us to places previously only imagined. Accepting the challenge of traveling farther into space will encourage today's citizens and future generations to grow and improve our planet. That's all for today's video. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And again, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.